Hello and welcome to this presentation. In this presentation we'll be talking about the road to restart, so all the steps that you need to take to think about restarting. So first of all, welcome and real congratulations on thinking about getting started. Don't forget there are lots of people on hand to help you. This could be your regional or county chair, your regional or county coach, for anything to do with equine, your regional equine advisors and your vets, your national activity leads, other RDA groups. It's worth noting that about 170 groups got started last year in 2020, and so there'll be lots of groups on hand that can help you with some practical advice and tips. Go to My RDA to find the latest list of groups that have got opened and got started. National Office can also help you, ably supported by the COVID-19 working group. If you're in any doubt about anything, please contact group support at rda.org.uk. So a quick overview of this presentation. This presentation is divided into three parts. Number one, things that you must do. This is the first few slides and set out what you need to do. Number two, things that you need to be aware of. These are labelled, please be aware. And three, additional information to support you. We've produced lots of resources to help you. You can use these if they're helpful, but don't feel that you have to if you want to develop your own. Before you get started, you need to think about how you make decisions at the moment. So at all stages of getting started, it's recommended you make decisions based on the following. Number one, is it safe? Recognising that working with horses comes with its own set of risks, and bearing in mind the risks associated with COVID-19 at the moment. Is it in line with our government guidelines or local restrictions? It's worth bearing in mind some of the things that you might read in the newspapers, online or on TV may not always apply to sport and physical activity, and so you need to then read these in conjunction with the RDA National Office guidelines. So the third one is it in line with RDA National Office guidelines? And finally, 4, will the resultant activity still be of benefit to our participants? So there may be times that you need to adapt your sessions because of the risk assessments that you've undertaken, the vulnerability of your volunteers or the vulnerability of your participants. And it might be that you deliver different types of sessions, whether that be things like quiet corners, stable management sessions, rather than ridden or driven sessions at the moment. So you need to think about the benefit that brings to the participants and how you can really make sure that the participants are getting the most from those activities. So this flowchart here talks about things that you must do. So this is covered somewhat in the last slide. So number one, read the latest government and local guidelines alongside the RDA guidance. Consider how your group may operate safely within this guidance. Consider what activities your group may do first. You may want to consider low risk first. So for example, I've mentioned stable management, I've mentioned quiet corners. It's very easy to socially distance using these sorts of activities. You may also want to think about the types of participants that you would be able to welcome back first. And actually, when we look at risk, this is about the risk in terms of people coming into closer proximity. And so actually you may need to welcome back those participants that are able to mount and dismount themselves, able to check their girth and stirrups, etc., before you welcome back those that need greater levels of support. If relevant, you need to work out how to prepare your equines for return to work. This may take several weeks, and make sure they're assessed for the activities they will do. Even if you're operating from a riding centre where the horses are provided, you need to work very closely with the owner of that riding centre to make sure the equines are prepared. So those equines may have been out of RDA sessions for over 12 months, and they may have been doing all sorts of different activities over the past year. And so you may need to think about actually how do you bring them back into RDA sessions to make sure that they are the ponies and horses that you used 12 months previously. You need to undertake a COVID-19 risk assessment for your activities using the categories in the RDA template provided. Make sure the actions are allocated to people and also dated. That risk assessment should be signed off by a trustee. Trustees signing off documents should have the skills or knowledge to be able to sign off these documents. So in effect, what we don't want people to do is in effect rubber stamp these documents. We need them to actually be responsible for the content of the documents and make sure that these actions are completed before volunteers or participants come back. Send out consent forms to volunteers and or participants that you want to have for any initial sessions. It's really recommended that you do a bit of a trial with small numbers of people to start off with. Go thoroughly through the trustee checklist questions and confirm that they've all been met. It does take quite a bit of time to do this, and then that should be signed off by a trustee. Then submit your signed trustee checklist and risk assessment to the National Office using the group support email. Once this risk assessment is signed off, you can commence activities as planned. When you send your documents into National Office, as long as all the information is provided and signed off as suggested, we aim to take 3 working days to get back to you. So please do give enough time for National Office to be able to sign this off. It will take longer if you have missing information or if documents are not signed off. So if you want to start quickly, please make sure that all the documents are as complete as possible. Once you've been signed off, make sure you regularly check government guidelines, including any local restrictions, as well as any RDA guidance on the My RDA website, and update risk assessments if necessary. You'll need to update your risk assessment every time a new activity is added as well, and they must be signed off by a trustee, but there is no need to send them to National Office. If you've already been signed off in 2020, check your risk assessment and trustee checklist is still current. Amend that if it is needed and get it re-signed off by trustees. There is no need to be reapproved by National Office. But please can you drop us a short email to National Office on the group support email letting us know that you are restarting. This means that we can update our records so that we know which groups have started and which groups are yet to start. There are a number of forms which I've mentioned in the previous slide. These forms have been developed to help you, but these are the ones that you absolutely must complete. So there is a trustee checklist questions and the checklist form. These are to be signed. There's the COVID-19 risk assessment template, and you can make sure you can add lots of information to this, but the template is the minimum amount of information that you provide. That's also to be signed. If you're responsible for equines, then the equine assessment and induction for riding, for carriage driving, and also hippotherapy, if relevant, needs to be used. There are also consent forms for staff, volunteers, and participants. So the ones starred here, the risk assessment and the trustee checklist mentioned in the previous slide, must be signed and sent to National Office using that group support email. Just wanted to talk briefly about track and trace. We know you all keep records of people at your sessions. For track and trace purposes, you need to keep these for 21 days. This is a legal requirement in England and is good practice elsewhere. Please include a reference to track and trace in your COVID-19 risk assessment. This is included in the template. There is some guidance around positive cases on the My RDA website, and it's called COVID-19 Early Outbreak Management Flowchart. We recommend you add the following to any system you use to collect names and contact details or make your volunteers and participants aware. We will hold your contact details for 21 days following your attendance at an RDA session or event. Please share this with NHS Track and Trace or similar, and we're aware that different countries have different names, if required to do so in the event of a positive COVID case, as this is required by government. And this covers off all the GDPR requirements. A COVID-19 officer is a requirement for venues in Scotland and is best practice elsewhere. We would expect groups to have an individual who will take on the role of a COVID-19 officer. So this should be the person that signs off the COVID-19 risk assessments, not necessarily the trustee, but the one who writes the risk assessments and then initially signs it. All sessions should be overseen to make sure policies are followed. This should either be the COVID-19 officer themselves or a person where this responsibility has been delegated to by that COVID-19 officer. And this might be the coach because they are in attendance at the session. It is possible that the COVID-19 officer is the coach themselves. Further information can be found on the Sport Scotland website, and they particularly have an e-learning module for the COVID-19 officer. We also have more information on the My RDA website. Second section, please be aware. So in general, face coverings can be worn by volunteers, including leaders and sidewalkers. It's really not ideal for riders. There's real risks of it getting tangled and is not recommended for riding coaches because it impacts communication. If a coach or volunteer has to breach social distancing where this is permitted, and in some places this is not permitted at the moment, so please refer to the latest guidance on my RDA. For example, helping someone to mount or dismount, to ride or to carriage drive, then they must wear a face covering when they're breaching social distancing. Please make sure you refer to our guidance on face coverings on the My RDA site. All sessions, including those that are unmounted, such as quiet corners and stable management, need to be led or supervised by an RDA coach. If alternative venues are being used, then a venue risk assessment must take place, signed off by a regional or county coach. You can use an alternative venue form if you go to an alternative venue approximately twice, using the holiday form. If you're going to go more frequently to a venue, you will need to have a venue risk assessment signed off. If your regional county coach is unable to travel to the venue, you can do this virtually. So you can do a live filming of the venue and the regional and county coach watch what you're filming as you're walking through the site, and they can do that virtual assessment. So please be aware for riding. Sidewalkers must be in a rider's household bubble, as this cannot be done with social distancing. If those sidewalkers do not have a green card because they're in the rider's household or bubble and they are not currently an RDA volunteer, you can record basic training for these volunteers, which permits them to support their rider only. If they are supporting other riders in any way, shape or form, or volunteering in any other capacity in the RDA sessions, they would need a full green card. Leaders can be outside a rider's household or bubble, but should aim to be socially distanced at all times. In most countries, this is 2 metres or 1 metre plus mitigation of either facing away or wearing a face covering in England, or in actual fact, potentially both of those mitigation measures. Please be aware for carriage driving. When carriage driving is permitted in your country, all those involved in carriage driving sessions, including all volunteers, should read the carriage driving protocols carefully and adhere to them at all times. Carriage driving coaches are required to wear a face covering whilst in a carriage with a driver whilst driving. And this is because carriage driving coaches are much closer to drivers than a riding coach would be. Face coverings can impede communication, and so what we're saying for carriage driving is that the majority of the communication should occur either prior to or after getting on or off the carriage. So it should not take place in the carriage. You should only give very short pieces of advice during the actual carriage driving session. Please be aware for vaulting. So individual vaulting may take place, but given the current challenges around social distancing, pairs and teams are not currently permitted, and this is in March 2021. But please refer to the My RDA website to find out the latest information. Also, please be aware for hippotherapy. Before hippotherapy is considered at a group, they must have been signed off by National Office to restart activities. In addition, they must complete a COVID-19 risk assessment for hippotherapy. This picks up any risks that are in addition to the standard risk assessment. This should be completed in conjunction with the hippotherapist. The timing of the commencement of hippotherapy at a group is at the discretion of the group trustees. All hippotherapy sessions must be led by a hippotherapist following CSP and CPTRH guidelines. Further information is available on the My RDA website. There are hippotherapy specific forms to be used for equine assessment, volunteer consent forms, and also a training record sheet. You also do need to bear in mind that the equines need to be assessed for more extensive PPE that is required by hippotherapy. The reason we have a separate volunteer consent form is the volunteers are required to wear considerable quantities of PPE during this process, and so the volunteer needs to consent to wearing that personal protective equipment at all times. All sessions would be under the supervision of the hippotherapist, and all volunteers will be required to adhere to everything that the hippotherapist said during that session. Mandatory information for coaches and volunteers. All safeguarding officers must be up to date with their training from the 31st of March 2021. If the safeguarding officers require training, there are Zoom training available, and this is detailed on the events page of the My RDA site. A first aider must be present at all sessions. All first aiders must have up-to-date first aid certificates. If this has already expired, this can only be extended to the 31st of March 2021. Please visit the My RDA site and click on Health and Safety to find out a little bit more about this. However, you do need to set up first aid training if you have expired prior to the 31st of March 2021 and you wish to deliver sessions from the 1st of April, or if your first aid certificate expires in, for example, April, you do need to make sure that you have started on the course of first aid training. This can either be delivered face-to-face with COVID restrictions in place, or can be delivered through what's called blended learning. More information about this is on the My RDA site under Health and Safety. Coach reviews for all types of coaches have been paused for this year until the 31st of March 2022. We want to make sure that coach reviews don't become a bottleneck for groups opening back up again. This means if you're overdue a review, you can still coach this year. All coaches with an overdue review will be required to engage in some form of training. This could be via Zoom or face-to-face when this restarts, and that needs to take place during this same period to March 2022. Here's some additional information to support you. There are a series of activity sheets which are aimed to support you in identifying what you can do. We've also provided template risk assessments to help you. So there's some information about virtual horse therapy. So if you haven't opened your group back up again, you can actually do some stuff with your participants without requiring them to come to your group. Quiet corners, mechanical horse sessions, and also lunging we've included here. Many of you work very closely with schools, and we know that the guidelines and restrictions on schools varies regionally and sometimes even locally. So it's a good idea to talk to your school to see what position they're in. Make sure you make contact with them and keep regular engagement, even if they aren't able to bring their school children back yet to your sessions. Whether your group is able to offer any sessions or not, have a talk with your contact at the school and let them know your current situation, what you can or can't offer, and also why. Really make sure that you get to know them and so that you understand when they're likely to be able to bring the school children back to you. We've produced some guidance and a template letter for schools to help you. This is on the My RDA site. Cleaning, sanitising and personal protective equipment. Advice about the need for and use of personal protective equipment, including gloves, masks, face visors and shields, is available on the My RDA site. We have a whole long list of cleaning and sanitising products. The list's not exhaustive and we're awaiting details of products to help maintain the quality of leather equipment that is subject to regular cleaning. We've now been advised that aqueous disinfectant is safe to spray on the inside of riding hats to sanitise them. We've got discount codes for both AGMA and aqueous, and please make sure you use these because you will be using a fair amount of cleaners and sanitising products, and these discounts can really help you. We also have a whole range of different posters. These are available to print. Please make sure you use these posters around your site to remind people about what the risks of COVID-19 are, to make sure people wash their hands, to make sure people sanitise their hands, to make sure people are socially distanced at all times, making sure that people remember to sanitise tack and equipment. We also have do not enter signs, so when you're welcoming participants back, there may be some areas that are out of bounds due to COVID. We also have a number of posters that set out whether an area is suitable for 4 people, 3 people, 2 people, or just 1 person. When you're looking at your site, you need to think about how many people can safely fit within an area, making sure that they are 2 metres socially distanced at all times. That's really important if things are inside. Make sure you display these signs on the outside of the doors as people are entering the different areas. Finally, there is help and support. So please make sure you contact us at National Office, group support at rda.org.uk. We'll be continuing to provide lots of resources to you, so hopefully you found this presentation today helpful in thinking about getting started. Thank you very much.